everyone. My name's Yvette Rowe. I'm the co-director of the Molly Wardaguga Research Centre, and with me this afternoon is Professor Sue Krusky, and we'd like to welcome you to the Molly Wardaguga seminar series. The seminar series has a real clear purpose. It's part of our Centre for Research Excellence, which is designed for three key outcomes. One is to collaborate with other research institution partners and community, to share learnings and capacity building, and also make networks. So we're really excited today that we've got a fabulous presenter, which I'm going to hand over to Sue Krusky to introduce.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to acknowledge I'm calling in from the lands of the Central Aranda people and pay my respects to the many countries that we're meeting on today, and to pay my respects to elders past, present, and the many deadly Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are joining us today. My name's Sue Krusky. I work with Yvette and others at the Molly Wardaguga Research Centre, and I also work very closely with our guest speaker today, whose name is R.Jones. Ray and I go back a very long way and have worked in a range of organisations and settings. Ray is a perinatal psychologist and with a great deal of professional and personal qualities that make her a really special member of our team, because she leads some very important work we're doing around reflective supervision and working with her colleagues to make sure that we do it in a way that's trauma-informed and also culturally safe. So I'm really happy that she's agreed to give us a bit of an overview of the work that we're doing, and look forward to working with her and the team in the months and years ahead as this model continues to evolve. So over to you, Ray.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Yvette and Sue. Hi, everybody. My name's Ray. I'm calling in from Gubbi country, beautiful Gubbi country, where it's very humid. I'll show you where I physically am located in a moment. Thank you all for having me here. I'm going to share my slides now and we'll kick off. Good. All right. So our talk today, we're here for an hour. Some of you might have got an invite for an hour and a half, but just confirming we're here for the hour together to talk through this concept of growing together the workers' ongoing journey of cultural safety, trauma-informed care, and reflective supervision. I too would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of all of the lands and waters that we're calling in from today. In this very incredible country, very diverse and incredible country. And I pay my respects to the elders, past, present and emerging, who have been custodians and caretakers and wisdom holders of this country. As I said, I'm calling in from Gubbi country in Queensland, just north of Brisbane, on the coast here. This is Mount Coolum, a picture of Mount Coolum on the left. And if we were in a drone, we would fly just over the other side of Mount Coolum to the north there, and that's where you'd find me. It's where I raised my family and live. I'm very fortunate. And it is that green. This is work that presenting on today is work that has been created over a number of years, and I'd like to first acknowledge the team who have contributed to this work. My co-presenter, Nikita Wiley, our nurse home visitor educator within the ANFP, is actually on the ground doing site visits today, so couldn't be here. But was happy for me to continue in her absence. We have a reflective supervision working party, and I'd like to acknowledge Nikki McGrady, Professor Anita Sherwood, Kim Cunningham, Emily May and Joe Henry for all of their contributions to this project to date. I'll do a little, actually, before we move on. So my background, I'm a practicing clinical psychologist. I've worked with community since I did my training. Back in 2012, I worked at the Murray School for a number of years, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Independent Community School here. I worked with the Institute for Urban Indigenous Health. My background is you know, kind of informed as well by being a supervisor, an endorsed supervisor for psychologists. I've been on the Australian Nurse Family Partnership Program for better part of 2.5 years, and bring my sort of multidisciplinary lens to this work in thinking about how we can integrate different knowledges to support the mums and bubs that we work with via the workforce. All right, so we're here to talk about this concept of reflective supervision. If I could see you all clearly, like if I had 5 screens here, I'd have you all on your faces hovering around, and I could do a bit of a quiz. But I'm sure if I asked you, you know, who's, you know, we did a bit of a round, who's heard it called coaching and buddying and yarning and facilitation, we could probably get some hands up all over the place. The thing about reflective supervision and what we're actually talking about is a really good place to start, is that it actually gets talked about in a number of different ways. Reflective supervision is, in terms of the work that we've been doing, is the space that we provide to the workforce to think and feel about who they are and what it is to do this work. So when we're talking about reflective supervision, and when I'm talking about it today, what I'm talking about is a space that's created for a staff member that is ongoing with another staff member, between, say, a supervisee and a supervisor, that is both ongoing, that it addresses, that is there to help with the professional growth and insight development of the worker for the purposes of improving outcomes for families. So it's a space where we look at how the personal meets the professional meets the political, because the work that we're doing involves all of those things. And we have certain spaces, we have had certain spaces where we talk about the doing of our work. Reflective supervision is a space to talk about being in the work and what comes up when we're being in the work in a gut, heart, head capacity. This metaphor is borrowed from my Yolngu elders, who use this metaphor of the coming togethers of the waters to acknowledge what happens when knowledge sets come in contact with one another, and that it can get really murky in that space. And reflective supervision is a coming together of waters. So reflective supervision is a space where the supervisee can consider the different knowledge sets that are coming together, the personal lived experience knowledge sets and the professional, the knowledge sets that are gifted from the client and the knowledge sets of the worker, the knowledge sets of the political as they meet the personal, the organizational as it meets the client. And so we're considering how all of these are hanging together in the unfolding relationship that worker has with that client or those clients. Put more specifically, for those of us that would like it to be a little more specific than a picture of waters meeting, this is a model that we have found to be very useful and relevant. It's been developed by the group, I believe it's VACA, Our Healing Ways, the Victorian Aboriginal Childcare Authority. They've got a resource that's available online called Our Healing Ways, Supervision, a culturally appropriate model for Aboriginal workers. And it essentially, this model that you're seeing here helps explain what kinds of things get spoken about in reflective supervision. So starting in the blue, people might talk about their role in the organisation, what it's like to work with clients. in the green, in the orange, looking after myself, and that broader encapsulating experience of what it is to work within community as that is unfolding. And these experiences, it'd be nice if they did kind of stay separate, but because we're complex humans, they never do. And inevitably, there's a really unique skill set that's needed to have these conversations as supervisors with supervisees in a meaningful way, and to know how to navigate these conversations with supervisees in a meaningful and relevant way that keeps the client at the centre. What we know, like all things really. This is a picture of obviously a shoot in a really old tree, and this slide was really here to help remind me to point out that in reflective supervision, some of us are going to, at different times, are going to be really new, both new as supervisees and new as supervisors, finding our feet of what it looks like to have these muddy conversation waters. And there's people amongst us who have been doing this for a while, and so are old trees at this, are old, have more established skills in what it is to be a supervisee and how they can use these reflective spaces to be the best practitioners that they can be. And there's also really experienced supervisors who have a sense of how to support and guide a person in their own learnings, in their own growings. The idea is that every relationship that we have grows us in some way, shape or form. And so you'd be doing this together, supervisee and supervisor. What do we reflect on in reflective supervision? And I've just noticed that I didn't give an overview, so I'm just going to pause and give a bit of an overview so you know where we're headed. We'll start off with a bit of just clarification of what reflective supervision is as we've unpacked it within the current work that we're doing in ANFP. We'll look at its relevance to this workforce, so workers working within First Nations communities with First Nations families in that perinatal period, in that time when like mum's either got baby in the belly or is birthing, or in those 2 years after bub's born, and where there's a relationship that is developed over a period of time. So whether that's a continuity of care model, or whether that's a child health model, or something where there is a relational component, so there is a relationship that is being built. We're talking specifically about reflective supervision for people working in this area. It's relevant for people working outside of this area, but this has been our specific focus for the last 2.5 years. After we talk about that, I'm going to talk you through what we've created in the form of a training program for staff and what that looks like. So that's a bit of the overview. Sorry that I didn't go through that first, but I hope that gives you a bit of a sense, and then we'll have time for Q&A at the end. So let's head back into it. So something unique about what we need to consider in working in the specific area that we work in, which I just explained, is that we need to expand our understanding of what we're reflecting on. So typically, our Gibbs cycles, these sorts of models of reflective supervision tend to have more of a client focus. So they tend to be asking questions about, what am I doing with this client? What does this family need most right now? Who can help with that? These are sort of reflective questions and reflective questions tend to have more of that client focus. Practitioner-focused questions are more reflexive questions. So these are questions that we're asking about who we are in doing this work. So these are questions about, how am I going with this particular family? What's arising for me as I work with them? What is, am I a good fit for this client? How would I know? how might our cultures be meeting, and how might that be for this client in this particular thing that we're working on. To help illustrate more of the reflexivity, I'd like to take you through a fun little game that was created by Valerie Alexander, and she's got a brilliant workshop on this topic on TEDx, I believe. So I want you, you can do eyes closed or open. Nick, when I'm presenting with her, she's like, nah, get your eyes closed, get into the mode, really feel into it. So if you want to channel Nick, please do that. I want you to imagine that you're running late for a flight and you are racing through the airport, you're checking your ticket, looking up again, wondering what the gate is. You see the gate, you see that they're just about to close that thing across the little runway going down. You just launch over there and say, oh, I've got a ticket on this flight. And you run down, they let you on. You think, oh, wow, that was skin of my teeth. I almost didn't make it. You run down the little chute and you hop onto the flight, and the captain's there waiting to greet you. And you find your seat, they check you, your seat, you find your seat, sit down. And you arrive and you decide, well, it's lucky I made it here. I'm going to go to that favourite restaurant of mine. You make a reservation for that evening and you head over to your favourite restaurant, and you sit down and you notice that there's a couple next to you who are celebrating their anniversary. And you think this is a pretty special moment to participate in, if only by sitting beside them. Pay for your meal, go and have a semi-relaxing sleep in your bougie hotel room, and wake up the next morning for the event that you were actually on the trip for. And the CEO of the organisation who's hosting the event takes the stage. So if you've got your eyes shut, you can open them. I'm going to attempt to see your hands here if there are people who have their videos. Who saw a pilot who was young? Who saw a pilot who was female? Who saw a pilot who was older and perhaps a male? Who saw a black older male? Who saw a white older male? When you sat down for your meal, who saw two men sitting beside them? Who saw two women sitting beside them? Who saw a man and a woman sitting beside them? And finally, who saw a female CEO take the stage? Who saw a male CEO take the stage? Yeah. So this exercise is looking at our implicit biases, and we all have them. About 95% of our processing of the world happens automatically from this place. And we all have implicit biases. We all have assumptions or stereotypes that we draw on to move about in the world. And what happens when our assumptions or our stereotypes aren't met is that we have a physiological response to that, and we can interpret that physical response that we have as something being wrong here. And it can cause us to have all kinds of interpretations then about our, for example, safety, if it was a female captain. And this can often all happen unconsciously. And this is happening in our work all the time. There's my very generic meal, and there's my very generic CEO. So this is happening all the time, and it's happening in our work as we navigate this very complex world with complex work and complex families. There are implicit biases that we have that our clients can really benefit from us bringing into our awareness. And so reflective supervision is a space where we can do that with the right skill set in ourselves and the right skill set in our supervisor. It can also be a space where we explore what our implicit assumptions are and how they might be playing out in our work and what we can do about them. So hopefully I've planted some seeds at this point around what reflective supervision could be for either you in your teams, for you personally as a worker. This is obviously, I've spent 20 minutes. This is a very, very tip of the iceberg. There are amazing resources out there about if this is something that you can see as potentially being helpful or relevant to your work and your clients by virtue of your work in your own as a worker. I'd be more than happy to share those, but equally too, like you can just have a look around, even Googling reflective supervision for workers. And there'll be plenty of different bits and pieces that you can have a look at. But I'll also talk about that a little bit more in terms of the training that we've created. It's important to acknowledge the national context in which this work has been created. So to answer that question, is reflective supervision just an ANFP thing? The answer is no. At different points in your training, depending on what your background and professional background is, you might have had relationships with different mentors that has kind of felt like reflective supervision in the way that I've covered it in today's talk, where there's been that relational ongoing relationship with a mentor at work that's helped you navigate the personal, professional and political contributions that are going on for you as a worker. But nationally, there's a recognition across many different domains that reflective supervision could be extremely beneficial for workers, the workforce, as well as for then the flow-on effects for the people we serve, the clients and families. And I just wanted to take you through those for anyone that is interested and who would like to position the work of reflective supervision within the national context. The new National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Health Plan 2021 to 2031 references a number of different priority areas for achieving the vision, the health plan vision. And I won't go through them specifically, but priority area 3, 6 and 8 all look at workforce and addressing trauma awareness and healing informed approaches, as well as identifying and eliminating racism. These are all relevant to the work of reflective supervision. The Cultural Respect Framework 2016 to 2026 emphasises the role of the practitioner's capacity to self-reflect as part of their ongoing professional development and commitment to providing racism-free healthcare. For any of our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander health workers and health practitioners who are here, the NATSIWAP scope of practice framework, you'll see here on the right, their model recognises that support and supervision is a big part of providing being a competent and supported worker in this space. This is from the cultural safety framework put out by NATSIWAP, and Domain 4 talks about individual reflection as a core component to being a safe worker. You can definitely go and have a read of the definition here, but it's very clear what kind of individual reflection they're talking on. Not although your star signs are interesting, we're not talking about necessarily star signs, we're talking about specific domains of yourself as a worker. The Health Education and Training Institute have a supervision for nurses and midwives framework and document that highlights all the various different relationships that nurses and midwives have in their training and their ongoing professional development, from preceptorship to clinical teaching, facilitation, buddying, engaging in your peer review, coaching and mentoring, but also it's referred to as clinical supervision, which is has that reflective stance. So we call it reflective supervision. That's the same concepts, different name. And recognising that that is a core piece of providing safe care to who we're working with. And the last national piece of work that our work has been influenced by is the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Health Curriculum Framework. So this is a framework that was developed to inform how we teach about how we teach cultural safety and how we teach about working with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples to students in health, and their cultural capabilities that are required. So those core skills that are required if you're going to be able to provide culturally safe care. And that's what you see here, that these are the capabilities, and Nikita Wiley's worked in this for a number of years and would normally talk this through. One of the key aspects is reflection, and there are key learning outcomes that are from the reflection capability that our training has been influenced by. So that's the last bit about the national context that we sit in. Bringing it back down to some more specifics about why it's specifically relevant for staff working with mums and bubs and First Nations mums and bubs in these kind of continuity models. Looks like it might, is that blurry on your screen there? No, okay, cool. I just wanted to take some time for us to talk this through. Why is it particularly relevant at this time? Yes, it's relevant for people working on the renal wards, and yes, it's relevant for other, yeah, awesome. Karen's just said that reflective practice and reflective supervision are core components of the new Australian infant mental health guidelines. I can't see her face, but yeah, competency guidelines launched last night. So another resource very much worth getting your mitts on. So thinking about, yeah, why is it specifically relevant for workers working with mums and bubs? So I wanted to talk you through this wonderful document, that image that was created by my colleagues Bronwyn Lee and Julie King from the Perinatal Training Centre in Melbourne, who have some great resources if perinatal mental health is something that you're interested in further exploring. But essentially it's saying, in this, circle of security, flags might be going up. This is a way of understanding the role of reflective supervision as influenced by attachment theory. So what we're supporting parents, and one of the big goals that we're supporting parents in relationally is to help keep baby front and center of mind. There's often a lot of things happening when a mum is becoming a mum, and that takes a long time to become mum. And along the way, the support around her can help her feel seen and be able then to see baby. So baby is asking, can you see me? And often enough, we want baby to be able to feel seen, to say, yeah, I feel seen, you can see me, you can see what my needs are. And those dark blue hands there are the caregivers. So yes, they're one set of hands, but they might be multiple people who are meeting baby's needs for exploration. So support my exploration and welcome me coming back to you. And so there are specific jobs that the caregivers for, that mum and dad or family are meeting, the specific needs that family are meeting for baby all along the way. And sometimes, depending on, what's available to that family, they might feel able to do that enough of the time for baby. But the families that perhaps we're working with are in need of some workers around them. And those workers can have specific jobs in terms of supporting baby to feel seen in their relationships with their family. And the worker might be doing things like supporting the parent's strengths, exploring experiences of motherhood, the baby, ghosts and angels. Ghosts and angels is a term out of a paper that was essentially reflecting like all the, your demons that can come out, all those memories, those hard memories that might come up when you're becoming mum, and all of the messaging and all the angels in your life that are supporting you to be the best mum possible. Having a space, that worker can create that space for mum to talk out loud about those things as well. And the worker's also doing, the work of helping mum with those vulnerabilities, to help her talk out loud about organising her experience, how she fills up her cup, helping her see Bubby in whatever's going on. And supervision is then that next layer, that's supporting baby who's supported by her family, who's then supported by her workers. Reflective supervision is there to support those strengths in the worker, to explore the experience of the worker with this mother or this family, this father, this infant, to help contain any of the vulnerabilities from that personal, professional, organisational, political sphere that might be going on, to help organise that experience, help look at what's happening with filling up that cup. That fill the cup is a circle of security term that you may or may not be familiar with, but it's that idea of replenishing yourself, so you feel like you can be available to the people in your life that you want to be available to, and keeping that baby in mind in all of the chaos that might be going on all around for either the worker, the family, the world around them. And we add an extra set of hands here to recognise that there are a whole bunch of other people that are holding the supervision, holding the workers, holding the family, holding the baby. So what we did is in ANFPP, in the Australian Nurse Family Partnership Program, one of the core core elements of the program is that staff have access to reflective supervision. And up until perhaps like 2.5 years ago, there wasn't training available to those staff who were providing reflective supervision. And part of our last 2.5 years has been putting together, thinking about what kind of training would be required to be able to provide these specific kind of spaces that we've been talking about today to workers. And we've created a program called Growing Together. It's a reflective supervision training program. And I just want to spend the last bit of this part of the talk, at least, talking you through what we put together. So again, this is not me. This is informed by a whole group of really amazing people with a whole bunch of knowledges, cultural knowledges, lived experience knowledges, book-based knowledges informed by direct work with workers and in supervision and with families. Typically, reflective supervision has been taught independent of trauma-informed care and independent of cultural safety. Typically, there's courses that we normally do these as 3 separate training programs. We might go to a cultural safety training program, a trauma-informed care training program, or a reflective supervision training program. And as far as we know, those 3 in a combined format, so recognising reflective practice skills, trauma-informed care, and cultural safety, haven't yet been incorporated into one training program. And that's part of what we're attempting to do with Growing Together. So we know that cultural safety, trauma-informed care, and reflective supervision are national priorities for health staff. There is this opportunity to provide specialist training in reflective supervision. Good support for staff mean that staff tend to stick around and feel happier in their roles, essentially. There's an opportunity within our program to strengthen the cultural safety, frequency, quality, delivery of reflective supervision nationally. We wanted to help our family partnership worker team leaders and nurse supervisors access their own quality one-on-one supervision if they hadn't had that before. And we also wanted to provide learning opportunities for all of the workers on the ground to actually learn about what reflective supervision could be and how they could use it to get what they needed for themselves in their work at this time. So here's the supervision, here's the supervisor, and essentially we're these blue hands wrapping around the supervisor and the supervisee offering that training. What we've created is theoretically based off a model that attempts to integrate trauma-informed care, cultural safety principles, and reflective skills to be able to, as a way of understanding the work of effective, reflective, and meaningful reflective supervision. So Growing Together is a training program in reflective supervision for staff who work with First Nations families and are wanting to offer and or receive reflective supervision. So it's both for the supervisees and the supervisors. And it's the first training that we know of that attempts to incorporate these three elements. The training is influenced by these different documents, which I've gone through previously. Best and Frederick's work in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander nursing midwifery care, as well as the work of Dr. Daphne Hewson, who is a leader in reflective practice and feedback in supervision within Australia, and has done work in Bantua and Alice Springs and Sydney, and has, before she retired, was doing work across both of those spaces. Our training maps to parts of the National Clinical Supervision Competency Standards, which are national standards for anyone offering clinical supervision, to say, you know, if you meet these competencies, then you're nationally considered as working with as a competent national clinical supervisor. I know because we don't do clinical supervision, including all of the experiential learning and offering formative and summative feedback, that our training isn't relevant to those parts, but it is relevant to other domains of these standards. So here's a bit of a visual of our training. Worth noting is that the training, a core requirement of the training is that a person is in regular one-on-one supervision throughout the training program with a supervisor of their choice. In time, we would love to have a cohort of supervisors who have gone through this training themselves and have been offering supervision to workers for a while, and then can also take on new learners, new, people who are coming through the program, so that we've got people who are living and breathing supervision in this way, offering supervision to people whom this is new to. So we've got old trees holding the new growth. We start with a one-day training on Zoom, and this one-day training on Zoom is for both supervisees and supervisors. And this one-day training in Zoom covers all of the things about what reflective supervision is and isn't, why we do it, where it sits nationally, like some of the content that we've come in contact with today, but goes into greater depth around reflective supervision. There's lots of opportunities for people to clarify what it could be and how it could be meaningful in their specific roles. The next two parts of the day are informed by the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander health curriculum framework, and we talk about what cultural self is and how that relates to healthcare, and how healthcare and health are frameworks that are defined by culture, actually, and how our cultural selves are interacting with culturally informed models of health, and how that might be having opportunities to consider how that might be for our clients, as well as our workers working within models of health that mightn't be aligned necessarily with their understandings of what it is to have health. We also talk about, importantly, about racism in healthcare and white privilege. So what it is to come in contact with our own power, what power we have that we have been granted through no choice perhaps of our own, but that we know less than have it. And so we explore what it is, what it is to have power, and the term is intersectionality of power, because there's actually lots of different aspects of our cultural self and our identity that give us power and privilege. And so there's some important concepts there that we cover that can then be used by supervisees in their supervision to really look at where some of those, in that reflexive way, look at where some of those blind spots or biases might come from, and how we can, in a respectful, gentle way with ourselves, address our limitations and for the purposes of working with our clients. So after this one-day training, we take our supervisees finish up, and we take our supervisors to be through the rest of this training. What we have created are 8 different online modules. OLE is online learning environment, which is the online package that we use within ANFP for our learners to help them on board and to continue their professional development. So we have 8 online learning modules that really target the trauma-informed care and reflective practice elements of more predominantly of reflective supervision. And after watching 2 and interacting and completing that learner workbook here, that learner workbook along the way, we meet for a group supervision session. So all of our learners come together and we have a chat about, you know, what it was like, what stands out, how it would work for them at their sites. And it's that opportunity for that meeting of the waters experience. So thinking about, okay, here are some core concepts through the videos, and here's a space to consider where those would, what of those are relevant for a learner at their site, a supervisee to be at their site, and the people they would be supervising, depending on their developmental level as supervisors, and generally as beginning supervisors, which is really where we've targeted this training to. So people would be getting ideas of what they might try, you know, in 6 months' time, or what they might try in 12 months' time, but where they might start initially. Then we enter into monthly group supervision with all of our supervisees within each cohort, and that's to support them to as they get established with working with some of their supervisees in integrating some of the concepts that we've talked about and workshopping any hurdles that they might come across, but also identifying those strengths and capacities. And when we think back to those hands, and again, that ongoing supervision is happening throughout. And there's much more I could say about it, but that's the end of the presentation. We now have about, is it like 15 minutes or so to take questions, comments, requests for more info. There's my email address. I was going to give out my mobile number, but I thought maybe I might get a few phone calls. And I only work part-time. So there's my email. I do check out Mondays, Tuesdays and Fridays. Please reach out with an email, but take yourselves off video if you can. Please don't be ashamed to speak up, ask any questions. Over to you, Yvette.
Thank you, Ray. Maybe if you stop sharing your screen, we can see everyone's beautiful faces. And yeah, thank you for an overview of what I think is a really exciting model, and that should have really significant relevance to anyone working in the First Nations maternal child space. Please feel free to either put your hand up, put your virtual hand up, or put your question in the chat box. We will monitor the chat box. And Ray's monitoring.
That was me.
Yeah, well, we could actually throw it open to Tiff in Congress, who is a recipient of this model, who may want to share her experiences of what it's like to be a recipient of this program. Tiff, are you up for that? I can't even see you.
Yes, I feel like I've been really blessed. I think it's been a fantastic experience, and I think just having it available for ANFP and really looking at the supervision training provided to the nurse supervisors has been a really important move, and kudos to you, Mob, for making it happen, because I think supervision is really pivotal, and good supervision makes such a big difference in people's lives. I do feel like it's an ongoing learning journey. So, yeah, it's something that we practice. I love the model that the supervisee and the supervisor are all involved in the training, so that we're all across it really, and that we can be a bit more transparent in supervision and talk to each other about how the supervision's going, and hopefully get feedback from supervisees. So I think that's a really important thing, and just that recognition that it is a slow journey, but having great having great supervision myself, I think that's really really pivotal as well, so that I get that, so that supervision is actually modelled for me, and can hopefully take it back to teams. Yeah, really important. So yeah, I'm really loving the learning, and hoping it's fast enough for staff.
Thank you. Am I still on? Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you, Tiff. I think the other thing that's really important to point out about this model is that the ANFP is funded to the model of the Australian Nursery Partnership Program is the team leader provides reflective supervision to her team, and that's actually out of step with many traditional clinical supervision or reflective supervision models. Ray, do you want to just talk to that, and I suppose just explain how we are working with that that tension between being both a manager of the team as well as a supervisor of the team.
Yeah, so typically, I mean, it's the same reason we don't kind of go to our significant others with and talk to them about problems that we have with them. You know, we would sooner go to someone else like that. If we're having that dual relationship, it's very hard for whomever we're talking with to kind of take one hat off and put one hat on. It's also hard for the person who's going to talk with that manager / reflective supervisor to feel safe enough to actually say that what's going on, you know, because their job could be on the line. So, you know, it's not best practice to have a dual relationship, but in some sites that's what's done. So our training does acknowledge that. We are also looking at systemic changes that we can make to make it be easier for staff to access reflective supervision from a person of their choosing. So looking at applying for grants for creating a collective of supervisors that could be a suite that people could choose from, that wouldn't have, you know, as big a hurdle for, say, the AMSs to support. We also have an incredible workforce in our family partnership workers, and they have, to get in partnership with their sites, many have created a team leader position. And that team leader, we've got our current cohort, a majority are the family partnership worker team leaders. And those team leaders will be available to provide reflective supervision to the family partnership workers as well as the nurse home visitors at their sites. And that's really for that team leader and her team to decide on that.
Thanks, Ray. And yeah, I suppose the other thing is if we kind of really pushed for a third person to come in as just a reflective supervisor, we don't want, even if that is best practice, we still want to actually give the team leaders an opportunity to be a reflective manager. So I'm looking at all the many non-ANFP people on this call. So even if you're a manager of an MGP or whatever, I still think there's huge benefit. And what we'd really like to see is how we can assist in embedding a culture of reflective supervision in all of our workplaces, because that will improve staff retention, staff satisfaction, and of course, ultimately quality of care to the clients that you do. So even if there's no workforce requirement for you to provide supervision, I think that it's something, and of course our universal workforce of midwives and child health nurses and nurses have never been exposed to an expectation from their workplaces that they will access this. It's been well embedded in mental health services for a long time, but our universal services have never actually paid enough resources to do it. So we are also really committed to changing that and advocating for policymakers and senior managers to make it available to all of their staff. There's something in the chat.
Thoughts,
that
questions?
Oh, here, Sue. Thank you, Amanda. Anything?
There was
any
another
other
question
comments?
about the cost of the training.
Who pays for it?
Yeah, so
Who pays for it?
we're actually about to submit a grant application to the Commonwealth Government to give us more resources to make this program available outside of the ANFP, with the target focus on our birthing on country sites. For those of you who are on this call, I presume you're following the CRE. So there is quite a lot of activity going on in the birthing on country world, and that overlaps with other research that we're doing. So we would like to say that we will offer the initial training for free. I can't imagine that we'll ever have the resources to do that ongoing supervision. What I really want everyone to take away is this isn't a 2-day training or even a multiple time point training that makes you a great supervisor. It's actually a commitment to a lifelong resourcing that we all need regular check-ins with a highly skilled supervisor to help us grow professionally and be the best version of ourselves. So yeah, we hope to offer it free of charge to our birthing on country sites and maybe our NT partners in health. But we will, it is obviously a fairly resource intensive thing. So keep in touch, I suppose, is the short answer to that.
You're welcome to email me if you're interested in future cohorts in doing the training, and also if you're interested in becoming a trainer. So if you have a specific skill set you feel like you could deliver in education and training, and you feel like you could deliver this training to supervisors to be within your community, please be in touch. We'd love to train you up to be able to deliver this content for supervisors to be in time, not tomorrow, but in time.
Yeah, and I also think the important part of what you're doing also is really concentrating on that the supervisees understand what this is all about, because again, nurses and midwives haven't come up through being exposed to this. And I think they might have, particularly if it's done by your team leader, they might have confusion. And then also, if we look at our Aboriginal staff, that we really want them to be supervised by Aboriginal team leaders. So having a standalone education module that helps both the supervisor and the supervisee understand their relationship and what we're trying to achieve is also really important. Any other comments? Jane Long, I don't know if you're trying to talk to us. Your mouth is moving, but you might be talking to somebody else. You're still on. No, you're still on mute. You're still on mute. Can you unmute? Sounds good to be opening this up to the wider health workforce. Yeah. And again, we want to stress that our focus is the universal workforce who are providing relational continuity of care models. So if you're working in an antenatal clinic in the hospital, you won't benefit from this as much as if you were an MGP. So relational models of care where the midwives, all the nurses, all the Aboriginal workforce is providing, and maybe doctors one day, is providing services or care to Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander women, or women having a First Nations baby. That's kind of our thing. I think the whole world should get this access to this model, but we are making it really specific to that group, and that's why we need to bring in that into the cultural safety, trauma-informed care aspects of white privilege, white fragility, etc., and racism in our health system.
I guess also from the research perspective, to ensure that we've got an evaluation framework to generate the evidence about what works, what's the learning and things like that. And we want to roll out robust evidence to other sites. So, the trial and see, and, and what does customization mean for each site? So we don't, I don't think it's a one size fits all. I think there's some key elements, there's some key threads to it. But what is there a difference between an urban site, a remote site, a regional site, and what do those nuances look like? So having an evidence framework, evaluation framework, I think is critical to spruiking the benefits, and also the unknown consequences that could roll out of this.
Jane Long here. I'll just do my bit because I've got to rush back to work. I'm up in on the Yolngu Nation. I've been working up here for quite a number of years, and have worked in with First Nation, clinics as midwife and also as a mesh nurse, which is not perhaps it's the same sort of concept as the Australian Nurse Family Partnerships. I say that, you can argue that, that's fine. I think this would be fabulous to be rolled out. I certainly see a very, white medical model working in Aboriginal culture, and they really do collide. They don't really work. There is incredible amount of racism. You can't. I even hear midwives say, I can't tell my bosses or the powers that be that I feel like I'm working in the wrong way, that because I'm scared I'm going to get into trouble. So where I work, a lot of good nurses are, leaving, and good midwives are leaving. I also think it ties in quite nicely with the gender stuff I was listening to last night, the ANU and gender stuff about respect and respectful practices for women. And I think, when midwives can understand themselves to a certain extent and be able to reflect on a practice, we certainly can do much better for our people or anybody we're caring for. But I think also the potential to maintain good midwifery, good passionate midwifery staff working alongside or with, in my case, Yolngu women to deliver good care. So I think that I'm worried about getting back to work probably. I think it has potential. I love it. I love the idea. Because there's a lot of battles that we as midwives go on in our heads about knowing that we're doing the wrong thing. We're sick to death of tick boxes, we're sick to death of this and that. And if you don't bring them in, then someone's going to complain against you. And I think it needs to be not a team leader. They've got enough. They have got enough on their plate without having that, which is a lot anyway. Dealing with staff. Anyway, I have to go. Thank you for listening.
Okay.
This is great.
Keep in touch, Jane, for sure. The other thing that we haven't discussed is that we are hoping to move towards this being written up as a subject that can be done as a university qualification that meets all the accreditation requirements. So you would be able to do it and then have it either as a standalone unit or as part of our masters that we'll be rolling out in 2024. So watch this space.
Thanks. Great discussion. Love it.
Yeah,
bye guys.
Bye, Jane.
All right, we're nearly finished up in the time, so I'd just like everyone to raise their hands and give Ray a big shout out for a fabulous presentation.
You did it. Still getting off.
I acknowledge all of you for being here and being interested in this exact topic, which I think is just a credit to you all in extending yourselves and acknowledging the extended scope of practice that anyone who's working in this space has to have, whether it's acknowledged or not. Extended skill set, extended hearts, extended minds. And so thank you for being here and engaging in this content in the ways that you have. I'm here for ongoing conversations about it, as are many of the different folk that I work with at the Molly Wardaguga Research Centre. So thank you.